Today we're making rice pudding. This is a dessert that my grandmother would make for me when I was a kid. I absolutely love it, and it's something that really easily lends itself to being made naturally plant-based. I'm adding some vanilla and a tiny splash of rose water, which if you don't like, just leave out. But it's probably the Middle Easterner in me that just loves that little bit of extra fragrance. We're also topping them with caramelized rice crispies. This is something that Chef Yasmina Hayek does at Em Sherif, my favorite Lebanese restaurant. It just adds a bit of fun caramel, rice, crispy crunch to a dessert that is typically just really creamy, luscious, and custardy. So without further ado, let's make a rice pudding. To caramelize our rice crispies for the top, we're going to preheat a high-sided saucepan that has plenty of room to fit all the rice bubbles or rice crispies. So we're going to make a dry caramel for this recipe. Whenever I'm making caramels, I do use white sugar. This just caramelizes better and there's a lower chance of it burning. So I'm just sprinkling in about a teaspoon at a time, and you can see that it has melted straight away, so it's ready for me to add in a bit more sugar. And I'm just kind of swirling it around the pan, and you can see it's quickly melting. The trick to a dry caramel is a hot pan. Make sure that you're using a light colored or stainless steel pan. You can see it's melting and taking on some light golden color, but we don't want to cook the caramel and make it golden, very golden, until we've added all the sugar in. So at this stage, we're just melting it bit by bit and then just swirling the pan around. All of our sugar is nicely melted and it's taken on a nice golden color. And I'm just adding that little tiny bit of the coconut oil and stirring it in. And I'm turning off the heat, adding the rice crispies. So I keep stirring, and eventually all the rice crispies will be coated in a nice layer of caramel. We do want to do this quite quickly. Don't be scared to stir them. They won't crush that easily. And then we want to spread them onto a pan and work pretty quickly because they will cool down. Spread our rice crispies out into a nice thin layer. And then as it's cooling down pretty quickly, we can use our hands. Do be careful, this is hot, to start separating them into nice small clusters that are going to create this really nice rice crispy caramel crunch on top of our rice pudding. You see, this has cooled down pretty quickly and you can just break it into nice small clumps. As soon as these are cool, we can just place them into an airtight container and keep them at room temperature until ready to use. To prepare the rice pudding, we are putting our milk into a saucepan and bringing it to a simmer. I really like using oat milk for this recipe. Then we add our rice. Seems like a small amount of rice, but this is key to getting a really good texture because a lot of this milk is going to evaporate. So we're adding our rice to the hot milk and then just giving it a gentle stir. As soon as this comes to a simmer, I'm going to set a timer for 35 minutes and come back to it. Now you can see the skin is forming, the rice is gently cooking underneath. As you stir it, it looks like everything is almost absorbed. Now I really love a custardy rice pudding. You could add more milk and the starch from the rice will give you this lovely custardy texture. Taking some sugar with some cornstarch and mixing those together and then adding a little bit of milk and stirring them together. And this is just going to create a little bit more of a custardy texture that our rice will be suspended in. So I'm adding that to the mixture, and I'm finishing with my aromatics because we don't want these to boil out totally. We add a tiny bit, you can see that was a tiny bit of rose water and some vanilla paste. I always add these last so the flavor and the volatile compounds in the aroma don't just boil out. With rose water, just be really careful that you're not adding too much. It really is a case of a little bit goes a long way. And we just want to give this a stir as it comes back to a simmer. It's also worth noting that rice pudding will firm up when it cools down. It's just coming back to a simmer and it's thickened up very slightly. You can see we've got the rice suspended in this vanilla and rose water scented sauce. So it's not too thick, but it's also not totally runny. It's got a nice bit of body to it. So our rice pudding is cooked. We just need to chill it down before we serve it. Pour it into a nice wide and shallow dish. Place a sheet of cling film on the top and press it down. This will prevent any skins from forming. Now we can just leave it in the fridge for up to 2 or 3 days. It's a nice kind of just set texture as it's cooled. but it looks really creamy still, and it's spoonable. At this point, we can either, I have made half a recipe, you can either use a piping bag to neatly pipe it into a serving dish, or spoon it into something more shallow. I'm doing this somewhat carefully because I don't want any mixture on the sides. You can see it's just really nice and creamy. Rice pudding is something that I love to eat, but I don't want to eat a whole bowl of it. It is quite rich and custardy, so I think that is a pretty good serving. And then to finish, really simply, finishing with our rice crispies. So just taking a nice spoonful of that over the top. We're just finishing with some lovely dried rose petals. And there we have it. That's our rice pudding. It's very good.
I bet it is.
And I mean, you can't miss the caramelized Rice Krispies on top because they are giving a whole lot of fun crunch to this often creamy and very soft dessert.